Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, a pay raise for teachers. Also, the V team takes a look at a new gas tax. And Speaker Mike Hubbard's continuance denied. But he's got some big ideas.
But what I'd really like to do is something extraordinary. Something big, something mega, something copious, something capacious, something kajunga.
Shut up! All this and much, much more coming up next on The V.
The Voice of Alabama Politics, with your host, Bill Brett. Now, the #1 political show in Alabama, The V.
Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and as always, I'm joined by the V team. Welcome all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This past week, we spoke with new Education Trust Fund Chairman Arthur Orr, and he said he believes he has the money to offer a pay raise to teachers. Beth, that would be welcome news, wouldn't it?
I'd say it's about time. Our teachers still make less today than they did when the Republicans took control. And, you know, they work long, hard hours. I remember the snowstorm a few years ago when our teachers stayed, overnight in some schools with kids. The work they do is just not rewarded enough, and I think it's time for a pay raise.
You know, Arthur just took this committee over. He says he and Senator Pittman are working together, and he's really excited. They've got some money for a change.
Well, of course he's excited. He used to chair the general fund where there's not been any money. Now he's got education. There is money. And I think it is time for a pay raise. But listen, people go into teaching because they want to do it, #1. And then #2, it's a good safety net and a good retirement.
But then again, I have to wonder also if this is not a package deal coming from the agreement with the AEA. Albeit it'll be good for the teachers. I also think they're probably going to let the tenure go through as well, so that they, the teachers get a 2-for-1 package for the AEA,
and Claire, you've been around a long time. They come up with this tenure bill, which looks like a stick, right? And then over here they got a pay raise, which is a carrot. But Senator Marsh has said he's coming with a full-fledged education package.
Well, that sticks them, and then that smooths them a little bit.
I think that's kind of what it is, don't you?
You don't want this, but I'm going to give you this. Mm-hmm. You can have one good, one bad. That's the way it's going to be.
Well, it's interesting. I think it's very clever. We did talk to Senator Orr a bit more about the general fund budget. I reached out to Senator Pittman, but he's been all over the place. He's got a lot on him right now. Claire, we're going to be short $180 million to maybe even $300 million. I mean, nothing new, but...
No, I mean, this is not anything new. And, we knew this last year, and we knew when we had these couple of special sessions that it was going to be just as bad for 2016 and 2017. So, I mean, and then just like he said, nobody's really interested and nobody has an appetite for more taxes. They didn't have it last year. And then, as the years wane down in a quadrennium, you get closer to an election year. So I would say this would be the last year really to maybe think about it. But the only thing I have kind of seen on the horizon that might possibly be there's been a lot of talk about gas tax, but I don't know where that will fall at the end of the day.
And we're going to get to that, but what about, what are you seeing?
I was going to say they just need to spend the money we have responsibly. I mean, how many millions of dollars have we spent, fighting the DMV closures, fighting legal battles with Planned Parenthood, the cases that we've lost, defending things we know are unconstitutional. We've got to at least spend the money that we have in a smart, reasonable way and quit throwing away dollars for partisan purposes.
I'll concur on that because I've said that time and time again. Mm-hmm. They go and pass things over there that they know are unconstitutional, and then we have to spend state dollars to defend it. And then go back to the finance department office, all these telephones and all this stuff. That's a waste of millions of dollars.
Well, anymore, a million here and a million there, and state government, it doesn't even add up to real money. I mean, they don't care about a million here and a million.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Susan.
I tell you what, a dollar here and a dollar there to the average family, when it adds up to $250 as opposed to $250 million deficit in their budget, that's a big deal.
It is. Mm-hmm. And the thing that's amazing to me, and I agree with everybody here, Arthur Orr said there's no willingness for taxes, he believes, and there's no willingness to rob the Education Trust Fund or take money out of the trust fund. So where do you cut? I mean, yeah, you can cut these little things, but Medicaid is still going to be out there. I mean, one of the things he said.
Corrections is still going to be there.
Yeah.
I think, kind of given what we've seen, the finance department and places like this where there's been a lot of money thrown out the window, and then I think they need to talk about passing bills that are unconstitutional.
Yeah.
Okay, for instance, Mike Hubbard didn't have the money for his people to go through all the truckloads of data that the Attorney General's office had to produce.
Right.
How much money do you think that cost the Attorney General's office?
Oh, a lot of
I'm
money.
sure a lot of money. But then Mike and his private lawyers, where he can pay money, they don't pay the money and have all this put into deposition forms where they can read it on the computer.
He's using campaign dollars anyway.
Never mind the special master that cost the Attorney General's office $1 million as well.
Up to $1 million.
Up to $1 million.
I do want to get back on this thing. The other thing he said, we've got to look at this situation with cuts, because if we have to start tossing people out of nursing homes and cutting off home health care, where do we stop?
Well, that's always the fear factor.
Yeah.
I've been back about 22 years. I worked in finance.
Yeah.
They always want to say, we're going to throw them out of the nursing home.
Well,
We're going to stop
grandma
home
out.
health care.
Open the jail cells.
Yeah, I mean, open the jail cells. That's great advertisement.
Yeah.
Okay, if you want to win, you want to say they're going to put your grandmother out on the streets, no health care, and we're going to open the jail cells. Okay, there are plenty of other things they can do as opposed to those type
And
of
can we look at Medicaid expansion for a second? I know that the way that it's funded, we will have a burden in 10 years that we'll have to take on. And it's been the policy, as far as I've been involved, that we just kick that can down the road. So why not just add another can into the mix to kick down the road on how we'll fund it? And let's accept the Medicaid dollars now. Let's keep our rural hospitals open. And let's fund health care for 600,000 Alabamians.
Well, interestingly, Susan and I spent some time with Dr. Bronner this week, and he said, look, we've passed up $1 billion a year for the last several years. He says, who does that in government, passes up $1 billion? It was a pretty interesting conversation, wasn't it?
It was a very interesting conversation. Can you imagine what $1 billion a year for the last 3 years could have done to our general fund budget?
We're fighting Obama every single day, and that's part of how we're doing it, Susan.
This is the way I look at it. Whether you're for Obama or against Obama, the federal government is the federal government. I don't care who the president is. If we Alabamans can get money from the federal government to stand, to keep our government functioning, there's no reason for us not to take it.
It doesn't stop us from taking it for roads. It doesn't stop us from taking it for education.
No.
I mean, our entire state government's propped up by federal
All the
funding.
rural hospitals that have had to close.
We've only got about a minute. I want to get to this. Mac McCutcheon has suggested that we have a 12 cent raise on a gallon of gas. So that's 12 cents, Susan, on each gallon of gas.
Oh, and they pass this off like it's something very, very small, but it's not. When you talk about your average working family, you say you have a small car to a mid-sized car, you got a husband and wife here, and you got kids, you're running all over the place. They're going to average, 1 to 2 fill-ups of that car a week, right? Well, it looks small when you just say 15 cents a gallon, but over a year's time, that couple will have spent $492 extra on just the gas tax. And we're talking about people here, they're only making around $43,000. If you think that's not a significant increase in their budget, you're wrong.
Well, Susan, look too at the way that when damage is done to our roads that these taxes are there to repair, who is causing that damage? Is it the mid-sized SUV on the road, or is it the trucker that filled up in Georgia and is going to fill up again in Mississippi once he drives across Alabama?
Well,
so why don't they do it? If they're going to do it on diesel or something that makes sense,
Well,
but not on average working family.
Then you go into meddling with farmers and agriculture. And I'm not really.
I have a farm, Claire. I
We're
know.
going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back. A great segment.
Start meddling. When it's pork and it's my pork, you go to meddling.
The V is sponsored by Spot On Strategies Group.
Bailouts reward failure and punish taxpayers. You know that. Senator Shelby knows that. Then why is Washington so stupid? When the big Wall Street banks came with their handout, Shelby said, "No way," stood firm, was the lead Republican voice against him. He refused to put hardworking Alabama taxpayers on the hook. Shelby's my kind of conservative.
Richard Shelby stands up to Obama every single day.
I'm Richard Shelby, and I approve this message.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. It has been almost 2 months since we made an open records request to the Department of Finance asking for the contract for the STARS program, the system that left hundreds of millions of dollars in unpaid bills, still is not functioning properly, and the state paid $47 million for it just for something that doesn't really work well. But we also asked for the contract. They said we could have it. They said no problem. We paid to have it copied, and now they're refusing to turn it over to us, citing that it's under a confidentiality agreement with them. Now, we've been told by attorneys that follow these type of contracts that once it's signed by the state, this non-disclosure confidentiality goes away and it becomes a public document. Secondly, we requested the minutes from a meeting from a committee headed by the Comptroller of Alabama under Jim Main and then under Bill Newton, called the Smart Business Committee. And now they're trying to make us believe that that committee that met for over 2 years never kept a single committee note. Susan, hard to believe.
Hard to believe. The further we look into this, the stinkier it's getting. Whether it's looking at the contract, whether it's looking at any of these proposals from CGI, and the closer we get to anything that's of evidentiary nature, the further they're pulling back, which makes me even more suspicious. There were emails that I exchanged with Cater back in December. Richard Cater, who was legal for finance, who let us see the contract. We went down there and saw the contract. We made an agreement right then to buy the whole contract. It was $140. I have the emails dating around December 21st when they were supposed to send it to it. Just not too long after that, all of a sudden they said it was proprietary information. Well, I'm sorry, proprietary information is not a proposal. Proprietary in that sense only means that whoever's proposing doesn't want their competition to see that contract before it gets signed. Okay, so there's no proprietary information ever in a document of that type.
Claire, have you ever heard of a committee meeting that didn't take minutes?
Nada.
No.
I haven't. And interesting, I mean, isn't Richard Cater now gone from the finance office?
He's leaving.
He's replaced by Brian Taylor,
yeah,
which I don't think the governor and them were aware of, in a career slot.
Yes.
And this is a former state senator.
Yeah.
There's a little fishiness around there as well. And unfortunately, this isn't, because it's under Governor Bentley's administration, it's reflecting on Governor Bentley. And I think Governor Bentley had no idea all this was going on, has been kept in the dark.
I would agree.
And I still think they're not being honest with him. I mean, Beth, can you imagine?
For a FOIA request, when you ask for a FOIA request, I don't care if it's state government, federal government, whatever, you pay for the document,
yeah,
you should be given it.
Beth, 2 people told me they have the minutes, but they are scared to death that they're going to lose their job if they get caught handing them over. I mean, what is this?
The point of minutes is to preserve the contents of the meeting, to put it on the record. That is what minutes are. It's one thing if a little club or a little organization wants to not take minutes, but this isn't a little club. This is the state government.
Yeah.
And we have to demand better, and we have to have accountability. Either it's proprietary or it's not, but if they pulled it out and showed it to you, then if it's proprietary and they showed it to you, somebody needs to be fired. And if it's not proprietary and they won't show it to you, somebody needs to be fired. One way or the other, somebody's messing up here and they need to get their ducks in a row.
Well, whoever these employees are ought to make sure they hire them a lawyer and say why they're worried they're going to get fired, and they need to hand this information out. And funny, for the record, I'm in a lot of little clubs with a lot of little meetings, and can I tell you something? We always read the minutes. That is the second thing up after roll call.
Sure.
In social organizations, in civic things, charitable things. Everybody takes minutes,
I mean,
and they read it. It's accountability.
And those minutes are available to anybody who requests them.
Absolutely.
If I want to see the Kiwanis Club minutes, I'm sure I can request them and they will be turned over.
I mean, Mr. Chowdhury, the comptroller, who was comptroller for many, many years, he led that He led that committee. This is a man of numbers and facts and figures. He's not going to run a committee without somebody taking some notes.
Well, he's retired. Somebody can probably get in touch with him.
Well, I'm looking for his phone number, and if anybody's got those minutes, I'd like to have them. Moving on a little bit, Kyle Whitmire reported this week at AL.com that Alan Treadaway has said he, as putting a bill before the House that will say if you are indicted on a felony, on any felony, you have to stand down from your leadership position. Will it come out of the basket, Beth?
Not as long as our speaker's sitting in his chair, it won't. Why in the world would he allow that to happen?
Well, you know what? I applaud Alan Treadway, and he's a good, honest man. Yeah. He's also in law enforcement. Yeah. He knows the law. He stood by things. And you know what? They need this. They do it in all the other states. Yeah. I mean, he's not saying you have to resign for your seat. He's just saying if that happens, you step aside, let the legal approach, let's let it carry its way, and then if you're found not guilty, then you go back to your leadership.
And Representative Treadway also probably knows how difficult it is to get a felony indictment. They don't just hand those things out like trick-or-treat candy. You've got to do something to raise a considerable amount of suspicion to get that indictment.
Well, 23 of them is a lot of candy.
That's a lot of
candy, right. And it's very reasonable. It calls for the Speaker, the President Pro Tem, the committee chairs, minority and majority leaders, those type of roles. There should not be any...
You shouldn't have those chairmanships. And the bottom line is, if you want transparency in state government, it's whether you're Republican, Democrat, you have a chairmanship, whatever, it should apply to every one of them in the House and the Senate.
Well, if you were in the U.S. House, you'd have to step down. That's just the rule.
Most other states.
They do it in all the other states.
Absolutely.
Not Alabama, though.
Well, we've got systemic corruption. I thought the Republicans would clean it up. Maybe they have a second chance. One thing also reported this week in AL.com was that, excuse me, the Democrats were reached by the Republicans who want to oust Mike Hubbard to get the Democrats to vote for a bill. To vote him out, to vote Hubbard out and vote a new speaker in. The article quoted, it talked about Phil Williams, Representative Phil Williams, who has challenged Mike Hubbard, and it talked about Ed Henry. Ed Henry, they said, was contacting Democrats. I talked to Ed Henry and Representative Phil Williams. Ed Henry said it's a lie. Phil Williams was quite more polite, Susan.
He was. Both of them said that this has not occurred. In fact, Ed Henry had posted a comment on that article at the bottom saying, this is not true. I have not contacted Democrats. And they took that comment down.
Off AL.com.
Off AL.com.
Now, it's interesting. Now, who's been contacting Democrats are Mike Hubbard and his lieutenants that pull his string. They have been contacting Democrats trying to make sure they'll still vote with him for Speaker. Now that is factual information.
Well, that should have been in the article instead of putting the non-factual. Somebody needed to do their research and they didn't do it.
Well, surprise.
I've worked with members of the House Democratic Caucus for a while, and I think that for the last 4 or 5 years of the supermajority, they've never asked the Democrats for anything. They've had the supermajority. They've had the votes to do what they want. And, in my opinion, personally, I think the Democrats would be silly to not make them clean up their own mess.
Well, I don't
but they're not. You've got a lot of members in the Democratic House Caucus that are supporting and walk 100% with Mike Hubbard, the Speaker, because you can go down the hall and look at offices and things like that and perks and all that. So they shouldn't, but you're right.
Right. Yeah. Well, I can't control them.
We're going to leave it right there. You're watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
Are you a Second Amendment supporter? Do you believe in the right to bear arms and defend yourself and your family? If you answered yes, then join the second annual Bama Carry Firearms Freedom Rally on Saturday, February 13th at the Bessemer, Alabama Civic Center. Special guests will be Fox News contributor and firearms instructor Jan Morgan, State Auditor Jim Ziegler, and many more. Lunch is included and vendors will be on hand with the latest products. Get your tickets now at bamacarry.org.
Welcome back to The V, the voice of Alabama politics. The once much vaunted storming the State House pact, started by Speaker Mike Hubbard, year-end report showed that it did not raise a dime, Claire. We could call it drizzle pack, or Beth says it's
sprinkle pack.
Sprinkle pack. That's not a good sign. He didn't raise any money.
Well, I think he probably hasn't raised money in that because he's got people out raising money for his legal defense fund. Mm-hmm. And then it appears to me that the former governor has got all his minions and staffers and Mike's gal that used to do all the raising, trying to raise money for these charter school bills and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they had this big rah-rah. So he's pulled a fundraising team over there, Raleigh.
So you mean that it's Hubbard being selfish again? Oh, gee, I can't imagine.
Well, I mean, you know, if the Rileys forsake him, he's gone. You know, if the Rileys pull out, he's toast.
Well, they're worried more about their charter schools and getting the money for that, because through the grapevine, I have been asked aggressively about my clients and money and other people, and I happened to run in this week out and about in town, all the little fundraiser gals luncheon, and they were with the education people.
Ah, I see. Don't you think it's interesting, though, Beth, that Mike's biggest campaign contribution out of that was to Mary Sue McClurkin, or that he wanted to run against Terry Latham?
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to try and keep somebody in the party that he has a hand up the puppet, so to say.
Yeah.
But I think that Chairwoman Latham has done a great job. She's spoken out against him in situations where she's needed to, and I think that, you know, he might see the writing on the wall on this one.
I just think that, you know.
Well, I think it's very interesting. There's another twist to that. He was trying to make good with Mary Sue McClurkin, who is a very nice woman, and I respect her. But he passed her over for the chairman of the Education Committee, because if you take longevity in Republican politics, she should have been number one in pecking order. She got mad. That's one of the reasons she didn't run again, and he's trying to make good. He was trying to make good with her by supporting her for chairman.
I completely forgotten about that.
That's the inside politics.
Right, but it is. And this week, Hubbard got a massive blow from Jacob Walker, the trial judge in Lee County. They asked for a continuance of his trial from March until the fall, and Judge Jacob Walker said, deny. That trial is to go forward on March 28th. Now, he did bring up the fact that they might mandamus him, but that's a big fancy Latin words that means we're going to appeal this to a higher court.
It means make me, is what it means, basically. It means they're going to take it to the higher court, and that higher court's going to, it's when there's a right without a remedy. And so they have a right to delay, and the judge is refusing to issue it. So they're going to ask the higher court to make that judge do something that judge doesn't want to do.
Right. They did that in the Barrymore case, right, Susan?
Yes, they did. They appealed it to the Criminal Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court of the state of Alabama reached down and said, listen, let's just cut the time out of this. They pulled it up. They didn't issue an opinion, but they stopped it, sent it back down in time for the Barrymore case to go on as scheduled.
It took them a month and a half to do it, but they did it a month before Barrymore went to trial. And I've been told by reliable sources that if Judge Walker will indeed make the rulings on this, that the court would have time to turn it around. And so that's what we're looking at. If Judge Walker rules timely, gets to the Supreme Court timely, they will rule in a timely fashion.
I think so, because they don't. There's been so many things thrown before them in this case already, and they keep throwing it back in a timely manner. And, you know, just for the record and the viewers and everybody else, you know, I think Judge Walker's been very fair, honest, and open about this. And just remember, I mean, people that are out there viewing this and hearing this, these lawyers that he has on this team have been on his case since day one. Just because he lost Mark White, you know, his show horse lawyer, the other boys and the guys, the gals, and whoever's working on the case, they've been on the case for a while.
They've been on this before the indictment.
He's still got Rob Riley, who was there before the indictment. They've got Lance Bell, who was there the same as Mark White. And they've got Philip Adams, who's been there since the indictment.
Well, their problem is the fact that they got all the documentation from the Attorney General's office last April, and they're still sitting on it. I suggest they get busy and get people downloading and pay for it. And let's move on.
They don't even have to have that to go to trial. They know what the issues are. You know what I mean?
And listen, we've been down this road before and watched I think that the Supreme Court is getting kind of tired of seeing all this stuff going on. I know the citizens are getting dang tired of waiting for this. And nobody we knew thought he was actually give him that date, but he did. I mean, they thought, well, at least they'll put it off till June, but I think Judge Walker's just said, enough.
I sat on this set and said, 2 weeks ago? I don't think that the judge will make them go to trial in March. I think they'll get the delay. And so, you know, I think that the judge has said what he meant. He means what he says at this point, and he's done putting up with it.
Well, they've just delayed justice so many times, and so you keep denying things, that keeps delaying justice. And this has gone on, for 2 years now?
Yeah. I mean, it's just outrageous. I mean, it's an embarrassment to the state. It's an embarrassment to the Republican Party. And I'm telling you, these guys over in the House of Representatives who reelected him Speaker, and now knowing what we know, They should be totally embarrassed.
You can't tell me this is not going to impact the session. Everybody knows it. We've talked to people all over the State House. Everybody and connected to politics knows this is going to be a roller coaster of a session because of this.
Yeah. Well, I tell you, they did an unprecedented thing this last week in the trial. They tried to subpoena me. They did subpoena Baron Coleman to give testimony as to grand jury leaks, as if we had gotten some kind of, or if I'd gotten some kind of leak from Matt Hart. And they used this situation of saying that, here's one, we released a press release from Matt Hart, open statement, 13 minutes before AL.com. We have had confidential sources within and without various government entities, including the AG's office, and he accidentally, inadvertently sent me a sealed document that the judge unsealed 10 minutes later, and he immediately apologized. To try and subpoena a member of the press, to me, is unconscionable, and I tell you, I will go to jail or more before I testify to a confidential source.
Well, the bottom line is they don't like you. You're a thorn in their side. You've done your research. Y'all report fair and square, and you back the facts up, and they cannot control you. So that is why they're doing this.
And once
this
again,
is nothing unusual.
Once again, this is another attempt by the defense to turn what was a hearing into an evidentiary hearing, and the judge said, not going to happen. Number two, I'm sorry, Matt Hart is not the only person in the AG's office.
Yeah, and my sources,
and ex-employees.
They're my sources. I've done nothing illegal or unethical, but I would never give up a source. And I've never gotten any grand jury information. So what?
And for the record out there, a good reporter has great sources all over state government, county government, whatever, and that means they have the trust and loyalty with people, and they know they're not going to reveal their source.
Yeah, and I just never can. We're going to have to leave it right there. You've been watching The V, the voice of Alabama politics. You have a great Sunday, and we'll see you next week.